Good evening, everyone. Um, Welcome to yet another episode of Dylan Life, our online forum put together to empower learners, professionals for a global impact. I'm IB, your host, and I'll be moderating today's insightful session. It's a continuation on what we had yesterday for um, some of us that were around yesterday. Um, this topic won't be new to us. Study USA, the American Higher Education Overview, Part 2. Joining you live at 8 p.m. West African time, that's 7 p.m. GMT, and 2 p.m. Eastern time. Tonight, we are privileged to host Dr. Rosemary Max again. She's Executive Director of Global Engagement at Oakland University in Michigan, USA. Um, Dr. Max's extensive experience in international education positions her perfectly to guide us, as we saw yesterday and will see even more today, through the nuances of American higher education system. And this live will be focused primarily on the graduate study programs. Um, Now we call it, or it's called graduate study in America, as some of us may be aware. But in Nigeria and in Great Britain, it's postgraduate. So let's give a warm welcome back to Dr. Max on this virtual stage. Thank you very much, Dr. Max, for joining us yet again. Please, you have the mic, the virtual mic.
Oh, yep. Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here talking about graduate school in the U.S., or what you call postgrad in Nigeria. And very thankful that some of you have given up your Friday evening to talk about this topic with me. And so I have a presentation that I hope will tell you a little bit about my university, Oakland University, but also talk about a lot of information that will help you with no matter what university you decide to apply to in the United States. And my email is there. If you have any questions, please feel free to follow up. So in the US, we have so many colleges and universities that you can apply to. There are thousands of them, and you can get many different types of degrees. But the two types of degrees we'll talk about today are graduate degrees or postgraduate degrees. One is a master's degree, and those can run from 1 year to 3 years long. And then the other one, the big one, is the doctoral degree. And so that can be a few years of coursework and a quick dissertation, or you could be in a lab for multiple years working on, curing cancer. That's going to be part of your doctoral dissertation. So doctoral students, sometimes they're at their universities 4, 5, 6 years. So it really just depends on your research program. This is a picture of our campus in fall. It's wintertime now, so it doesn't look this nice, but this is what Oakland University looks like in fall. There's another picture of our campus. And then just a little bit about Oakland. So we're a university in Michigan, not far from the city of Detroit. We were formed in 1957. We're what we call a medium-sized public research university. So we have about 16,000 students. About 800 of them are international students coming from about 70 countries. About 60 students are from Africa, and we typically have 10 to 15 students from Nigeria at any given time. As I said, we're in the Detroit metro area. We get our name Oakland University from the county that we're in, called Oakland County. Detroit is an automotive center for the world. So Oakland County has over 1,000 international companies in our county that are part of the supply chain, part of manufacturing, healthcare. And these are companies where many of our students, particularly in healthcare and business and engineering and computer science and in science, find internships and jobs. We have 7 schools and colleges, so College of Arts and Sciences. So that's your typical economics, history, biology, chemistry, etc., music. We have a School of Engineering and Computer Sciences, a School of Business. We have a medical school, a School of Health Sciences, a School of Nursing, and a School of Education. And as I mentioned, we're a Doctoral II public research university in Michigan. Doctoral II means that we have a high research output, but not the highest. So there are universities that are bigger than Oakland. We're a medium-sized research university, and there are universities that have one kind of level above us in terms of their research output. So if we mentioned graduate education in the United States are master's and doctoral programs. Most master's programs are very much course-based. You're taking courses and amount of credits to get your master's degree. Some master's programs include a longer paper or a project, but some do not. So a lot of times you have an option to take all course-based master's programs. Sometimes you can take a course-based program plus a dissertation, not a dissertation, but more of a thesis that can be part of a master's program. So doctoral programs can be PhDs, it can be doctors of education, etc. These are the longer programs, and at least the doctoral programs that I know of, they all include a formal thesis or dissertation. And that's where you're actually writing something that will be contributing something new in research to the area of study that you've been studying for over all the years that you've been in the program. So I want to talk a little bit about STEM degrees. So those are degrees that are in science, technology, engineering, or math. So your biologies, chemistries, computer science, even psychology is a STEM field, all those sorts of programs that are science or technology focused. In the United States, once you complete a STEM-focused degree and you graduate, the U.S. government gives you 3 years of work permission to work in the United States. If you are in a non-STEM degree, you get 1 year of work permission when you complete. So the work permission, which we'll talk about a little bit later, is called optional practical training. So you finish your degree in physics, you can apply for up to 3 years of work permission to work in your field of study in the United States. If you finish a degree in history, you can apply for 1 year of training, post-graduation training in the U.S. Some MBAs, a lot of MBAs, a very kind of popular degree for American students and for international students. So be careful here because some MBAs are STEM coded and some are not. That means you want to make sure if you're applying to an MBA and you're expecting 3 years of work permission when you finish, you want to make sure that the MBA you're applying to is a STEM MBA. So we'll talk a little bit about the application process. So normally you're going to go to the website of the school that you're interested in, and you're going to look at the graduate part of the website and then come to, it usually says something about a graduate application or how to apply. So that's where you're going to get a lot of your information. So the U.S. has so many schools, and I'm going to talk to you about things that are going to be in common for most graduate applications, but there are many variables too. So it's very important to read what each school is asking you to submit for their application. So some schools do not have an application fee. We have, while we do not have an application fee at the undergraduate level, we do have an application fee. Oakland is OU, that's why I have OU in there, Oakland University. Our fee at the graduate level is $45. Some schools have a $100 application fee. So if you're thinking about applying to 5 or 6 schools, that can add up. So you want to kind of make sure that you take that into consideration in your planning. Some schools offer a waiver of that fee for different circumstances and for different reasons. But as you're doing your research, you can look to see, can you get a waiver for the application fee? It's always good to ask that question. The answer may be no, but it's really good to ask the question. Part of the application is going to be your transcripts from your undergraduate university. And sometimes you need to get those transcripts evaluated by an outside evaluator, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So while there's typically more flexibility for grades at the undergraduate level, kind of how well you did in your undergraduate years, in graduate admissions, the grades are important. So we usually would say for most graduate programs, and it depends on the program, some can be more competitive, and some schools are more competitive than others, but you would want to have at least a 3.0 to apply to a graduate school in the U.S. In general. There are exceptions to that, and actually the higher grade point average you have, the better. And in the U.S., the grade point scale goes up to 4. So 4 is excellent, or an A, or 100%, or a 90%. 3 would be like a B, or what I will call an 80%. So, that gives you a sense of kind of how the type of background that you would ideally want to have to be competitive for a graduate program. So 3.0, 80% B or higher. As I said, the more competitive the graduate program, the higher grade point average you want to have to be competitive for admission to that program. Part of the graduate application is a lot of writing. So you're going to be doing a lot of essays, maybe, depending on your field, submitting some writing samples. I have in English, although I know your education is in English. When I speak to other groups where their education is not in English, you would want those writing samples translated into English. Almost all graduate applications are going to ask you for a copy of your CV. They want to see, in addition to your education, what else you've been doing. Maybe you have work experience or research experience or volunteering experience or something that's going to be important and that is on your CV. Another very important piece, a highly important piece of an application process for a graduate program is faculty recommendations. We'll talk about those in a minute. Standardized tests sometimes are part of the application process, and we'll talk about those. This last point I cannot stress highly enough. So for PhD admissions, doctoral admissions, it's really important that you match with a faculty member, right? So for a PhD program, you are going to be carrying out research. You want to be at a school or working in a department or with a faculty member that has a research interest that's aligned to yours. Faculty members on admissions committees will say, this person can be part of this project. I can tell by the work they're doing. I have a grant in this area. I'm looking for a student who can research in this area, right? So there's much more of a matchmaking that can go on. It's informal and informal matchmaking that goes on in the PhD admissions process. And I often encourage students who are serious about a PhD program and who have a good background to reach out to faculty members, read the faculty members' information on the website. Is that faculty member engaged in research that you can imagine kind of learning more about and wanting to be a part of? So you'd want to reach out even prior to it, sending an application, and talk to the faculty member over email about their research. So just to back up and talk about transcripts. So this is often a complicated part of American application processes. So it's complicated because all schools are different. Some schools will ask you for just a copy of your transcript that you can upload into the application that shows the classes you took and the grades that you got. And they have people in-house that work at the university that can evaluate and look at that transcript. Others will not accept copies. They'll say, we need something uploaded directly from your university, right? They want to make sure that the university central office will upload a copy of your transcript directly into the system. Others will want you to send your transcript out for evaluation to an accredited evaluator, and I've listed a couple there, right? So this is a third party that you would pay a couple $100s to that would then look at your transcript and do the evaluation for the school, right? So this would take the place of an in-house evaluator at a university. And then one thing that's good to know is once you pay that fee, you can direct your evaluation to multiple schools. So you wouldn't be paying it over and over again. You would pay it once and you'd say, I want my evaluation to be sent to these 5 schools or these 6 schools that I'm applying to. Typically for graduate education, you're having your diploma evaluated and what's called a course-by-course evaluation. But again, each school is different on this. So this is a very important part where you'd want to look at each school that you're thinking about applying to and see what they say on the subject. Okay, it's very hard to know how each school sees this, but these are some of the ways in which that they would be asking you for your transcripts. So as I was mentioning, writing is a large and important part of a graduate application. Where an undergraduate application might ask you a few questions about yourself or to talk about yourself. There's a couple things that they're trying to find out about you with respect to the writing and the essays that they're asking you about. They might want to know about you personally and what motivates you. And there might be an essay that focuses on that. And then you might have another essay that will want you to be very specific, or as specific as you can be, I should say, about the types of research you hope to carry out at their university. So you may find a statement of purpose essay where They would want you to tell them about yourself briefly. What has brought you to the point of applying to their graduate program? So 2 or 3 strong points on where you are in your life. Why are you applying to this program? And why specifically to their program, right? So, you could pick 300 programs to apply to, but why are you applying to this one? So schools want to hear why you feel you're a fit for their program. And that takes research on your part. That means going to their website and saying, I see you have this particular research in chemistry that I'm very much interested in, or you have a double degree program in 2 areas that I'm interested in. That's why I want to do this. So, there's different things to kind of consider when you're talking about why you want to apply to that particular school. And then a lot of schools are interested in what you want to do after you leave their program. So if you're applying to a PhD program, do you want to work in industry when you finish? Do you want to work in academia when you finish? Or do you want to do a combination of both? If you're applying to a master's of business, how do you see yourself using your business degree after you leave their school? So they're very much interested in your success beyond their program. So having 2 or 3 strong points about what you're hoping to do with the degree is also important. You want to have a strong conclusion that kind of highlights, again, your strong points and your reason for applying. Stick to page limit and word limit. There's nothing worse than getting a bunch of long documents to read. If I'm on an admissions committee and I didn't ask for them, and I have someone who's gone on for pages and pages, it's just too much. So make sure you stick to the page and word limit. Have someone edit or proofread for you. That's very important. As a graduate student, you need to analyze in the application process, is this the only place where you get to write about your academic and research experience? Or is there a statement of research also? So if you're just given one statement of purpose, you're probably going to want to say something about what your academic goals are in this statement of purpose. But most graduate programs will give you 2 opportunities to talk about yourself and what you're hoping to do. And then we'll move to the second one now. So you may get a chance to write something called a statement of future research. And this will be important for some master's programs, but mostly for PhD programs as well. So they'll ask you things like, what do you want to research and why? Your research idea does not need to be perfect because you're not already a professional in the field, right? You're still a prospective student, you're still learning, but they're going to want to know what is your interest and what is your passion, right? And they're going to want to know or get a sense of what contribution you will make to the field. So as you move into graduate school, especially doctoral research, that's what your faculty members are going to be asking you. You're there to hopefully make an original contribution to the field you're studying in. And so how do you see yourself doing that? They're going to want to know if you've already carried out research. Have you published anything? Are you writing anything for publishing? Have you submitted anything? You may not have it published yet, but you could say, I've submitted these things for publication. You may not have those things. It may be less important for your particular program, but these are some of the questions that would come up in an application process. It's very important to look at what the faculty research areas are in your intended school or department, and does your research or what you want to do fit with the current faculty? Some schools will even ask you to include faculty names, right? They'll say, who do you think from our faculty that you would be a best fit with, in terms of what you want to do? So as you could tell by what I've written and read there, the doctoral admissions committees are seeking to understand your capacity for research. That's the bottom line. So if there's also a statement of purpose, how does the statement of research coordinate but not completely repeat, right? So if you have 2 opportunities, use both of them to your advantage. You want to think about the space they're giving you to write about yourself and do the best you can getting your message across. There may be other kinds of essays. They may ask you some personal questions where you have an opportunity to talk about more personally about yourself. There sometimes is a question prompt that says, is there anything else you want to know or that you want us to know or need to explain? So one example of this could be if you didn't have a good semester on your transcript and you didn't get good grades for for some reason, you may have been ill. The school may have been, you may have had your faculty members who weren't, at school anymore. You may have had a parent who passed away. So sometimes schools give you a question that helps you address those things, and you should just explain. All of that is important information for a graduate admissions committee. More schools are asking students in the U.S. about a diversity essay, right? So the U.S. is a big place. It's a diverse place. These issues are very hot topics right now. Sometimes faculty want to know, how would you bring diversity into our program? Or have you been parts of diversity efforts? What does it mean to you? You would be coming from another country. Maybe diversity has another meaning where you're from, and you would explain that, and you would talk a little bit about some of the diversity thoughts that you have on diversity. So not every school asks these questions. These are just some questions in some parts of an application that you might encounter. So when you're writing an essay, it's super important, especially at the graduate level, not to use others' work or to plagiarize or to use AI. Don't use that to write an essay. It'll be evident to committees, and that will just not vote in your favor in terms of an admissions decision. The other thing is, don't feel pressure to make yourself sound like you're perfect. Admissions committees don't like that. They prefer that you state facts. So here's a couple examples of that. If you go on in an essay and you say you're the best at something, that's very hard for someone to judge. But if you say something like, I'm ranked number 2 in my class, that's a fact or a factual piece of information. It's much easier to judge than I'm the best, right? You could say I'm a prominent researcher. Okay, well, what does that mean? It's more valuable to say something like, I raised $35,000 to carry out my research, right? So I'm just trying to give you some examples. I'm not saying that you'll have these exact examples, but it gives you a sense of just making a value statement versus including factual information that's much more helpful for a committee to decide. So I'm an excellent writer versus I have published these 2 articles, right? Again, don't be afraid to list challenges or failures that you've overcome. That's really important. Don't miss any deadlines. Sometimes scholarship and assistantship applications may be separate, and we'll talk about those in a minute. So sometimes at the undergraduate level, there's a rolling deadline. It's much easier to kind of get admitted even beyond the deadline. So graduate programs sometimes are more competitive, and it's really important to understand when a deadline is, and that will be listed on the school's website for their application. And sometimes schools have 2 deadlines. They say if you want to be considered for an assistantship or a scholarship, you must meet this deadline. If you're not interested in a scholarship or assistantship, you can apply and meet a second deadline that's later. And that's usually because schools want to decide who they're inviting and admitting and who they're offering an assistantship or a scholarship to early on, so they can kind of lock down the class that's coming to be part of their program, if that makes sense. So, again, do your homework, research your school, research, everything you can in terms of being able to kind of make the best essay. Do understand how all the essays and statements that schools ask for work together. When you read all of the essays and all of the kind of question prompts that you're answering in your application, it should be a full picture that makes sense, and it should tell a coherent story about yourself. You should jump off the page, right? When an admissions committee reads what you're writing, they should be able to really get a really good sense of who you are. Again, at the doctoral level, reach out to faculty members who you think might be a good fit for you. Sometimes they're not taking new students. You could be working on an application for a faculty member who has all of his researchers. He doesn't need another student, or she doesn't need another student. So sometimes they list that on the website. They say this program's not taking new students this year, or this faculty member's on sabbatical, or this faculty member's not taking new students. So these are things that are a little bit more complicated, but can come into play in graduate PhD applications. There's almost always a director of graduate studies or a program coordinator on the website for each department, and that person is a great person to reach out to in terms of asking questions about applications. I've also listed one link on what I think is a good example of a successful graduate school essay. Some programs ask for writing samples. Do you have a published article? Do you have an abstract in English? Do you have a paper that you did in school that you're particularly proud of? So If your application process is asking for those things, you're going to want to make sure that you have those. Some schools don't ask for those. It just really depends. Almost all programs ask you for an updated CV or resume. So in the US, just a couple things. I lived in Europe for a long time, and it would always freak me out when I saw a photo of someone on their resume or their age. And that's because in the United States, we don't list that information. It's basically your name, your contact phone, email, a short objective of 1 or 2 sentences, your educational background, your work history, any publications or conferences you've attended, special technical or language skills. You can certainly add volunteering or other things that you've done in your life on a CV. So faculty recommendations. So almost all graduate school applications are going to ask you for 2 to 3 recommendations, and they usually say we want at least 2 from an academic source. So, and they ask that because they want to know how long a faculty member has known you and in what capacity. And they want faculty members or people that have taught you because they can comment on your capacity for research and graduate work, right? So these are the people that have seen you in a classroom. They can know whether you have a capacity to go on to graduate work or you have a capacity for research. Typically, the way these recommendations work is that you're working on your application in the system and you're putting in their name in an email system. And then as part of the application, then you click a button and a link is sent to your faculty recommenders to upload a letter or to fill out a form, right? And you don't get to see that. It just goes directly to the school. Sometimes a third recommendation can be from an employer or another non-personal relationship. And so you can have a third recommendation that's maybe not a faculty member, but for graduate level work, make sure that you're cultivating those relationships with your current faculty members and your current teachers so they can do these recommendations for you. Standardized tests are sometimes part of the graduate application process. So English proficiency, there are many different tests, TOEFL, IELTS, Duolingo, there's other options. Schools will have these policies listed on their website. I would say 79 to 80 TOEFL is fairly standard. Could be higher for more highly ranked schools. So make sure you read the school's proficiency policy. Now, I'll just tell you that at Oakland University, if English was the language of instruction for your university in Nigeria, we would not need you to submit or take any of these tests, right? We would just need a letter that says English was a language of instruction at my university, and you would be exempt from the English proficiency tests. And we do that for anybody who's been in a school, no matter in what country, as long as the language of instruction was in English. Now, other schools take a much harder line on this and would make you take one of those exams. The other exam, standardized exam that sometimes you encounter for admissions to a graduate program is the GMAT, which is mostly focused on business, or the GRE, right, which is a grad records exam. So, you know, some schools no longer require these exams. Some schools make it optional. Some schools say don't even submit these exams. We won't even look at it, right? So here again, it's going to be really important to understand the program you're applying to and whether the GMAT or the GRE is required. Some schools may require it, but your score might not count as much as it used to in the admissions process. And other highly competitive schools will eliminate huge groups of applicants based on the scores, okay? So at our university, some programs have a GRE requirement and some don't. Most do not have a GRE requirement. And there's the link to the test. I think it's a couple $100. There's a free virtual test. There's short prep courses and free prep tests, but I would hope that you'd be able to find a university that doesn't require this, but it just depends. If you do have to take this test, my best advice is to take the actual full-length prep test multiple times, so you have a baseline of your score and a reality of what you might score on the exam when you take it for real. So there's a verbal part of the exam, and then there's a math part of the exam. Another piece of coming to the U.S. for education is cost. So part of the application process is proof of funding, and that's also part of your visa process. And So at the graduate level, especially at the doctoral level, there are typically more funds for international students than at the undergraduate level. And so I'll talk about graduate assistantships in a minute. So as part of the application process, you're submitting proof that you have the funding to come to the United States, or you're checking a box that says, I would like to be considered for graduate assistantships, if that's an option on the application. And so once you're admitted to the school, you get what's called an I-20. This is a document that every school in the United States has a way to issue you this document called the I-20. And that's a document that you use along with other things, to go get an F1 student visa. And so on this document, the cost of attendance is listed, and the cost of attendance is usually always made up of tuition for 1 year, housing for a year, food, and sometimes some other things. So at Oakland, we include health insurance, tuition, housing, and food for a year. Other schools include books, spending money, etc., but we try to keep that cost of attendance down a little bit by not including all those extra things in there. So we include tuition, housing, food, and health insurance. Funds must be liquid and available for you to use. So if your family is funding, or you're funding your education, so it would be your bank statement or your family member's bank statement, or some other scholarship that maybe you receive for some reason. Sometimes people's companies pay for them to come and get a graduate degree. So these are just options that I've seen over my years working in this field. So most schools' annual cost of attendance in the United States is above $50,000. So it's important to understand that it's incredibly expensive to come to the United States for schooling. So our cost of attendance for graduate work at Oakland is between $34,000 and $36,000 a year. So it's much less than the average cost of attendance at other schools. And that covers 2 semesters of tuition, housing, food, and health insurance. So you have to figure out how many years you'll be here, etc., right? You can set up a payment plan also to help kind of pay those costs. So here's sometimes the game changer at the graduate level, especially at the PhD level. Many larger research universities like ours, and even bigger schools, have what are called graduate assistantships. So this is a way for you to help to fund your education and to work 20 hours a week, usually with a faculty member, either in research or teaching or grading or helping support academic classroom activities. So a graduate assistantship typically pays your tuition and gives you a living stipend. So when I go back up to that cost of attendance, if you're lucky enough to get a graduate assistantship, it should cover most of the things that are on the I-20 for your cost of attendance. Then you'll get a decision from a school. So some schools take months, some schools take a few days. That's more at the undergraduate level. At the graduate level, typically your application is sent in to graduate admissions, and they're shipping it out and sending it to the graduate department. And then the graduate department has to get together in a group and decide on who they're going to admit. So it takes longer at the graduate level than the undergraduate level to be admitted. The decisions you typically will receive are yes, congratulations, you're accepted. So at the graduate level, you might find that you're accepted with an assistantship, and they'll tell you that. Or you might find that you're accepted, but you don't have an assistantship. So those are things to kind of keep in mind as you're thinking about reviewing your decisions when you get them after you've applied. Some schools will say, no, we're sorry. We don't have room for you. We wish you well. Other schools might waitlist you to see if you can get a place a little bit later, depending on how many students above you on that list commit to the program. And then at some point, if you're coming, you commit, you send a deposit, and then the school issues, or at some point in the process, you get that I-20 and you move on to the visa process. We'll talk about that next. So the I-20, as I mentioned, is a document issued by the U.S. school to you, and you would take that to get your F1 visa. You're also normally taking with you an acceptance letter, so the school would issue that as well. We accept you. We're happy that you're coming. Here's information that you need. So you'd be bringing the acceptance letter. There are 2 other fees that our federal government charges you. It's an I-901 fee receipt that you'd need, I-901 fee, and you'll learn about that in the process as your school accepts you. So you'd be bringing that receipt with you, and then the DS-160 is the actual visa application. I think that's still $160. They might be putting that fee up, but so those are the two federal fees that you pay typically. You're also bringing proof of funding with you. So I'm funding my education. Here's my bank statement. My parents are funding my education. Here's my bank statement. My company's funding. Here's the information. My government's funding it, or I got full assistantship from the school, and here's the proof of that, right? Also in the visa process, you have to be able to articulate fairly quickly why you applied to the school, what you will do, how you will carry out your education. You have a few minutes to say something to a visa officer that conveys that you understand kind of where you're going to school, what you want to study, and what your plan is. So that's why it's important to research your school. They're also going to ask you what your intention is after you finish your studies. And it's important to say that you'll return home and how you'll use that degree at home. They're trying to figure out if you're an intending immigrant, if you intend to immigrate to the U.S. And as a student, you have to remain in what we call the non-immigrant category. So you may at some point decide to try to get a job and move on and see if you can be hired by a company more full-time. But at this point, when you're a student, you're a non-immigrant, and you have to remember that you're in that category. And so you need to explain that you have ties to your home country that are both economic and social, and that you would want to return there after your studies are completed. So in the visa process, maintain eye contact. That's really important. I know sometimes people from traditional countries tend to, especially if they're dealing with an authority or someone who may be older than them, shift their eyes down. In the United States, keep eye contact with people. Be confident. It's about stating your case briefly and confidently. So the biggest denial reason code for students in the visa process is what's called 214B, which is insufficient ties to home country. So we just talked about that before. They want to know that when you complete your degree that you're returning home. So are you going to show your ties to home country? So that's, you'll be able to find more information about that as you talk to students and fellow students and people who may have applied for visas at the consulate that's closest to you. I would say apply again if you're denied and just bring more and new evidence. So we've worked with several students in my line of work. I'm always working with students who are denied the first time. They either went underprepared, they didn't bring enough documentation with them. It wasn't a good day for them for some reason or other. It wasn't a good day for the visa officer. The conversation didn't go well. You can try again. So students do overcome the denial sometimes on the second interview and the second time they go through. Some do not. But we've had a good track record of having students overcome denials the second time they go in for a visa. So if you have an assistantship from the university, it's going to enhance your chance of a visa. And the reason for that is that shows to the officer that not only did the school admit you, but the school feels that your background is important for helping them to carry out their research mission, and they're willing to give you an assistantship and pay for your education. It is extremely rare for students who have this kind of funding to be denied a visa. So, as you think about coming to the U.S. for graduate studies, even for PhD studies, keep this assistantship in mind. They're not easy to get, but you always want to have that in the back of your mind as you're applying, making sure that you're being considered for an assistantship. Is there a separate application for an assistantship? Are there assistantships for my field of study? And because in the end, it's going to enhance your chances of getting a visa. Just a couple other features of U.S. higher education. So we just talked about the assistantship and what it pays for. Some master's programs offer assistantship, but they're less likely than PhD programs to offer them. PhD programs are competitive. Again, see if your research interests align with a particular department or faculty member. So working in the U.S., and F1 status, your student status, you can work 20 hours a week during the school year on campus. And when school's not in session, so for example, the summer session or over the holiday break, you can work 40 hours a week or full-time on campus. And that's part of your status. You don't need any further approval for that. So off-campus work, you need further approval for. Okay, so that happens through offices like mine on university campuses. So there's a way to, after you've been in the U.S. for a certain amount of months, to work in your field of study and an internship off campus with approval, and all of your international offices at whatever school you end up at. We'll talk to you about that. And then you can work once you graduate and apply for what's called optional practical training, OPT. You can work for 1 to 3 years, and you apply through your university's international office. Again, 3 years is available to you if you're a STEM student, if you have a STEM degree, and only 1 year is available to you if you're a non-STEM student. Again, cost of attendance for U.S. grad programs is $35,000 and up. It's not cheap. So just one more thing. So a lot of times people focus on standardized tests when you're thinking about graduate admissions. But if you notice, I spent several slides on writing, essays, CV, faculty recommendations, getting your point across about who you are and what you want to do. That's incredibly important in the graduate admissions process. Your grades and transcripts are incredibly important. I spent half a slide on the GRE and other exams. It may not be required, and it may not be important for your admission. It might be important depending on the school. But you've got to really kind of get a sense of kind of what is the most important element for this particular application at this particular school. Again, PhD programs fit with faculty, and program research is super important. And I can't stress enough the capacity for graduate work and the research at the school or department, especially if they're offering you an assistantship, is the key piece, right? If they're offering you an assistantship, they're hiring you. You're going to be working for them part-time in addition to your schoolwork. What they're saying to you is that we believe you can carry out this research. So that's why all that is super important. Your faculty talking about your capacity for research, you talking about any of the types of features you have in your background that would enhance that. And then I just put a link to our graduate programs and our graduate application for your information. Then finally, just always show our mascot, which is the Golden Grizzly. And he is all of our teams, our basketball teams, our swimming team, soccer team are all Golden Grizzlies, and that's our cutie, our little mascot. So with that, I'll stop sharing and then see if there's any questions. Thank you so much. I know that was a lot of information.
Yes, thank you very much, Doctor. Really a lot of information there. And we have received a lot of questions also. First, Mujit tried to join yesterday, but network was really not cooperative. Please, are you on today? Can you hear us? If you can, perhaps we start with your question.
Looks like it's still network.
We can't hear you.
Yeah.
Oh. He's really very insistent. Anyway, I can run through a host of questions here. I'll come back to you. Hopefully the network should cooperate at this time. So the first question, I have about 20 questions here, but frankly, you have answered some, if not most of the questions, but I have some that I would like to bring up. Now, these questions we got from people who sent them to us before the event, and some that were sent to us during the course of your presentation. Now, I'm going to start with these. How should students prepare to meet the high academic standards set by a school like yours? Now, that question came when you were talking about the standards, you know, how intense and how proud, the quality of studies, you know, the quality of CGPA in the on-proud program. So that was when someone posted these questions.
Yeah, so I think the most important thing you can do is to be able to, you have to have a good grades and a good transcript, right? So as I was saying, you would need at least what we would consider a B or an 80%. I don't know how that would translate in Nigeria, but you want to make sure that you're a good student. You want to make sure that you have things on your resume that kind of show the type of work that you're doing in addition to what you're studying. So if you're interested in a particular topic, hopefully you have some work or some volunteer, some research experience also in the area that you're interested in. So think about how all that coordinates together. I think that's mainly, what you would want to do to prepare. You just, for graduate education, you need to be a good student, as I'm sure almost all of you are. And then I think you would want to make sure that you just emphasize those things in the application process. So it's really hard to, you want to it's hard to prepare other than by telling students just to do as well as they can in their undergraduate program.
Great. Thank you very much, Chiwike Okere. He said, my question is, after studying in the US, can one stay back and live there?
Yeah.
I will let Dr. answer this.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things to think about. So yes, as you complete your degree, as I mentioned in the presentation, you have options to work in the U.S. for 1 to 3 years. There are options to kind of get a work visa after that if your company is willing to hire you for that work visa, right? It's called an H-1B visa. So some students use the time on their optional practical training to maybe transition to a work visa, but it's not easy, right? You have to have a company that's willing to hire you, and you have to go through the H-1B lottery and hope that you win, and then process your H-1B. There's also family-based immigration, right? So you're here, and then you fall in love with someone, who is a citizen, and then you stay in the United States after that because you have a family reason to stay rather than a work reason. But as I mentioned, when you're thinking about coming to the United States as an F1 student, it's really important to emphasize that you're a non-immigrant, you're not intending to immigrate, and that you focus on your school program at hand.
Great. So someone asked, is H-1B visa a lottery?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So it's a chance. It's not a right. It's not a privilege.
Well, let me say something about the H-1B. So there's two options typically, or two big sides or trunks of the H-1B tree, if you will. One is H-1B in the private sector, and one is H-1B at a university. So the U.S. Congress determines how many H-1Bs are open every year, right? And so it's around 60,000, and sometimes there's 20,000 extra for people who finish a graduate degree in the United States. And so those are lottery based. Now, then there's a cap. So once that cap is reached, you're done for the year, right? And that cap is reached very quickly. So there are other parts of the U.S. that are not cap exempt, and that is if you work at a university like mine, and the university is willing to get you an H-1B. So anybody who's in the university system is not exempt to the cap. So once those visas fill in the private sector, universities can continue to apply for and receive H-1Bs for their employees. Now, usually universities are doing that for tenured faculty members. So if you go all the way and get your PhD and you're hired as a faculty member at a university, there's no problem with them filing for an H-1B for you, and they're exempt from that lottery, right? So you just get your H-1B and you go right into faculty life, and the H-1B gives you an opportunity to transition to a green card after that. So it's a little easier on the university side than it is on the private sector.
Great. So what I hear you say is that diligence and excellence is key for anyone who wants to stay in the US. Mm-hmm. So if someone who came top of his class in the PhD or filed patent and the school wants to retain him, it's almost as good as done.
Yeah, what I would say is
for the intending student.
Yes, especially for a PhD and especially in a STEM field, The truth about the U.S. Job market is that those are students that we want to retain here. So if you're educated here in chemistry or physics or, finance or computer science or, mechanical engineering, our workforce wants to retain you. So it's just easier to do that on the university side with the non-cap H-1B than it is on the private sector side.
Great. I thought I should project this comment by Adi Uluwa Adebayo. He said, "God bless you, Ma. Thank you, Thalos. And this is life-changing information."
Wow.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I'm excited to share this feedback for you to see. Thank you.
Amazing, yeah.
Then the gentleman called Chiwike Okiri. Are there opportunities for scholarship in your school open to, I guess, Nigerians? Mm-hmm. Can one participate? Where can one read more?
Yep. So you would have to think about what subject you're going to study, right? And so all this is very aligned at the graduate level. So I can tell you that in our application process, if you are applying to a graduate program, there's usually a box in the application process that says, do you want to be considered for an assistantship, which is like a scholarship? And you would check that box and say yes. However, it doesn't mean that you'll get one, and it doesn't mean there's an assistantship in that area, right? So it just really is, it depends. And, there are lots of assistantships in the STEM fields, like in engineering, but you would have to have an undergraduate degree in something that was very related to that and have done very well in your undergraduate degree to be kind of considered for an assistantship.
Great. Daniela says thank you. Thank you very much, Daniela. Mujid, unfortunately, we couldn't hear him. Let's try again. Although he has sent me a message of his question. But let's see if you can say it by yourself. Can you hear us? All right, let me read it out.
Okay.
I really do not know why I'm not being heard. Okay, but please, I would like to ask what's the difference between personal statement and personal purpose?
Statement of purpose and personal statement. So that just the difference, the essays, is it just a question about that? Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah, that's the question.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
He wants to know the difference between personal statements. Yeah.
Okay. So each school calls these things different things, right? And so one may be a personal statement saying, say a little bit more about yourself. One may be a statement of purpose, and that would say, what is your purpose? Tell us your academic reason for coming here, right? And one might be a statement of research. So they can be called different things. You may only get one of those essays. You may get two of them. But the important thing is for you to understand which essay makes it look like they're asking you just for more personal information about yourself. They're giving you a chance to say something. And which essay might be asking you to be very specific about your academic goals and your pursuits. And some schools will only have one essay, right? And they might say, here's the one question we're asking you. And then if that's the case, you want to make sure that you include your kind of heavy-hitting academic piece in there, right? You might say one or two things about yourself, and then immediately you're going to say, here's why I want to go to your school. Here's what I want to study. So there's no perfect answer to this question. You just have to understand kind of the application and the amount of writing they're asking you to do and what fits where.
Great. I hope this helps.
Yep.
Okay. Daniela is saying, if you intend to study something different from your first degree, but related to work experience, do you stand a good chance with a 2.2 CGPA?
So is a 2.2 kind of on a 4-point scale?
So, Daniela, you might need to clarify for us. So it's possible, in fact, in Nigeria, I'm aware of a limit of 4, a limit of 5, and 7. So I know University of
Okay.
Ibadan is 7 out of 7.
So what I would say is,
but
if it's a 2.2 GPA that would kind of be in the U.S. system, I would say that's a low GPA to be admitted for a graduate program. However, I know at my school and sometimes at other schools, they have ways for you to come as a visiting student in a first capacity, right? And part of what I've seen international students do is they come to our school. Let's say, here's a perfect example. I had a student who was a doctor in China and an anesthesiologist. She didn't want to be a doctor anymore. It had been a long time since she had been at school. Her math grades were not great, and she wanted to go into a master's of a statistics program in the U.S. at our school. So I looked at her math grades. I said, oof, I don't know if this is going to work. But we have this program that allows you to come for 1 semester or 2 semesters, and you can take courses that may be seen as prerequisite or foundational courses in the area that you're most interested in. And if you do well in those courses, you have a much better chance of being admitted. So that's a way that you can kind of think about switching a field. Like if you're changing from your first degree to your second degree and you want to do something completely different, or especially if you have a lower GPA, you would also be able to maybe come as a visiting student to a school for a semester. You'd be taking the courses. They would be most likely counting toward your degree, or they could be courses that you would need as foundational prerequisites. And that will give a school a really good sense of how well you do in their graduate program. You have a much higher chance of being admitted. Okay.
Great. Okay, so I guess what she meant was a second class lower division. Okay. So that usually between 2.5 and 3.49. 3.49 over 5.
Yep.
So upper limit of 3.4 over 5.
Yep. So I guess that it would just depend on how competitive that program is. I'll give an example. Like if you did an undergraduate degree in sociology and you wanted to come and do a graduate degree in Master's of Social Work, those are close enough. Like you wouldn't have to take an undergraduate degree in sociology to go on to a master's degree in social work, right? So there are degrees where your undergraduate degree doesn't have to match perfectly. But for example, if you did an undergraduate degree in sociology and you said, I've been working in biology and now I really want to go on for a master's in biology, you're going to need to show that you've taken those science classes, or you're going to need to take them in maybe a visiting student capacity. So that's a difficult question to answer, but I think there are some options there.
Great. You mentioned the opportunity to take courses. So let me ask this question. Is it possible for a student who has not so great CGPA to select some undergraduate courses and write sit for them so that the capacity can be assessed based on the new performance in those selected courses?
Yes. So at our school, I can't speak for other schools, but at our school, we have a program called the American Semester Abroad Program, the ASAP. And so in this program, you can come in from up for 1 to 3 terms. So 1 semester, 2 semester, or 3 semesters. And you can select courses, and we would work with you to say, if you're interested in this graduate program, here are the 3 or 4 courses that you should take. And if you do well in those courses, you have time to meet the faculty, right, in your program. You can go to their office hours. You can talk to them. You can say you're interested in the graduate program. And so it really gives you a semester to be able to take some courses, do well in those courses, meet the faculty, understand what the graduate program is, and then be able to apply to it. So we've had several students do that. And in this program, when you come in as an ASAP student at our school, you already get a discount on tuition. You get what's called the in-state rate instead of the out-of-state rate. So it's also kind of a way that can help you overall with your costs of coming to Oakland. Other schools have similar programs. Not all schools have these programs. But, we would work with students who come through this program to make sure that they select the courses that they need to make an impression on the faculty if they were interested in going on in a graduate program.
Great. So these are like an Oakland advantage. So I want to say something about a peculiar situation in Nigeria. So sometimes you see very great students who, because of the competition in the university enrollment system, they were unable to get the course that they love to study undergraduate. So they just got a course that they didn't like, so they didn't have passion for it. At the end of the day, great student, but ended up making not so great score or CGP at the end of the day. So we see that a lot in Nigeria, but the ASAP program can be a kind of a remedy to relaunch one's academic program, aspiration, so hope is there.
Yes, we call it a bridge program. It's really a bridge program. So yes, the way you're describing it is exactly what it is.
Great. So I'm going to move to the questions we have collated. Our colleague in Thielen here worked on some of these questions, got them from people. So how can students prepare? Okay, we've talked about this. That's meeting the high academic standards in American institutions. Could you provide more detailed information on financial aid, scholarship opportunities for international students? I must say, frankly, that anything finance, everybody wants to get the most of all the opportunities there are regarding financial aid and scholarship. Yeah. So I know you've said a lot about this, but if you can just still say some other, anything new.
Oops, what was that? Oh, sorry. My computer screen went black for a minute. Okay, yep. So I can say more about financial aid. So a couple things. The top line about coming to school in the United States is it's expensive, right? When that tuition comes due, that bill comes due, it's a shock, right? So you want to make sure that you have your finances clear. The second piece is that state and federal aid in the United States only goes to U.S. citizens and green card holders. So any state and federal money that are doled out to students are only for green card holders and U.S. citizens. What you have as international students in the United States is what we call institutional funding. So that means each institution has funding and scholarships that they may be able to be awarded to you. And so there are small scholarships that can be handed out sometimes, but really the big piece, as I've talked about a couple times already at the graduate level, is the graduate assistantship. So if you're not getting a graduate assistantship to come and complete your graduate studies, you really have to look at how expensive it is to come here. The other thing that I'll say is that at Oakland, all students who get a non-campus job are paid $15 an hour, and you can work 20 hours a week. So while that sounds like it might be good, and it is for spending money, right? You might accumulate $700 or $800 a month for spending money. That is going to be a drop in the bucket compared to what you need when that tuition bill comes due, right? So it really is kind of looking at what options do you have, and really at the graduate level, it's going to be assistantships. Maybe there are some scholarships, like once you come and distinguish yourself, maybe your department has a $1,000 scholarship or a $5,000 scholarship, but you're not going to know that until you come and do well and they award you that. But I would say on the graduate side of things, especially for master's programs, those programs are shorter, right? They can be 1 year, they can be 18 months. So, you would think about, how would you finance that, right? And then at the PhD level where the programs are longer, you're hoping to win an assistantship. So paying tuition and paying those bills here is no joke. So I have people whose families tell them that once you get there, you can get a job and make money and pay these bills. Right? It's just you're restricted and you're working, at least when you start out being a student, and you will not be able to work in the dining hall on campus and earn enough money to pay your bills. So, this is another thing too, to talk to fellow students who have gone overseas, who come to the US in particular, and have them kind of tell you a little bit about what they've experienced. But we see the other end where a rumor goes around and families said you can go there and get a job and you'll be able to do this. And it just doesn't happen, right? And then you're stuck with a large bill, right? So you want to think about how you finance at least the first and second year of your education, right? So you're not stuck in that situation. Because what happens as an international student, then your enrollment gets blocked. And then once the enrollment gets blocked, I can't tell the government that you're enrolled, and then your immigration status gets to be a problem. So I can't kind of give you a rosy picture of that. You want to make sure that your finances are clear.
Great. I think this is a very important aspect that Dr. Max clarified, because everybody will say, oh, go to America. America is land of plenty and opportunities. You can work and pay your bills. That's not the reality. There's no way you can work as a student.
Yeah, but not during. Maybe after, but not during.
Great. And even after, you must be there's a process, to stay in America legally. There's a process, and the best bet is to plan to be excellent. And if you go in there and you are excellent, especially in STEM area, and if you are fortunate enough to be retained as a faculty in the school after a PhD program, then you can have an opportunity to stay back legally. But aside that, don't think you can go to America to do a $15 per hour job to pay a $35,000 tuition. Just emphasizing it, because it's very important to help our people to have the correct information.
Mm-hmm.
So someone is saying, can I move to United States as a student? Yes, you can. If you have F1, I can answer that.
Mm-hmm.
The second part is, can I move in with my spouse and children? I have 3 children. I can fund my studies. I have savings.
Yes.
Okay, good to know you have savings.
Yep.
This question is,
okay. Yeah, are the spouse and children already in the United States, or spouse and children in Nigeria?
No, in Nigeria. Okay. He's asking if he could move to US with them.
Yep. So that's a great question. Student. So as an F1 student, you can bring dependents called F2 dependents. So you can bring an F2 spouse, and you can bring F2 children that are under 21 years old. So what happens on the I-20 is it increases the amount of money that you need to have, right? So each school has, if you're bringing, let's say, a spouse and a child, or a spouse and 4 children, there's a little bit of a factor of funds that are needed for each one of those people being in the U.S. as your dependent. So it can add a significant amount of money to your I-20, depending on how many kids, right? But yes, people bring their families, they bring their spouses, they bring their kids. Spouses can go to school part-time. Spouses are not able to work. Your students, your F2 students, if they're school-age students, just can flow right into the public school system in the U.S. So if your kids are school-age, they can, they go in private school too, but then there's that cost. But most people come and they have their kids go just into the public school system. And so yes, that's no problem.
Great. We have run short the time, but let me see if I can take a few more questions. Are there scholarship? We've spoken about these. How can students actively use? Okay, great. How can this is post-study question? How
Hmm.
can students effectively use their American qualification in their home countries or globally?
So that's a really good question.
American qualifications are great.
Yep, it would actually, it would also depend on what kind of qualification, right? So if you're in a field that's medical or a nurse or like nursing or something that actually has a clinical piece, you would have to find out, like if I qualify as so nursing, for example, there's a perfect example, right? Nursing is a field that's in high demand right now. We have lots of students coming for nurses. The U.S. needs nurses. When you finish a nursing bachelor's degree, you take a clinical exam for the state. And so that qualifies you to be a nurse in the United States. So you'd have to find out what does that qualify for you in another, does that qualify you to be a nurse in another country? So sometimes degrees like that, where there's a particular clinical piece, are a little bit harder to figure out the equivalents in other countries. But other degrees that may not have a clinical piece, that may be, PhD in history, PhD in engineering, PhD in finance. We have many students also who elect to return home, right? Or return to a third country. They're recruited in a third country. And so, and those employers find their degrees very relevant. So I would just give you a little bit of a caution on the clinical piece and also legal, right? The legal piece. If you're coming to be a law student, right? Law is different in every country, right? So, if you come to the United States and you want to do a degree like what we call a Juris Doctor, a JD, that's going to be American law. So there are a couple of degrees you want to be careful on in terms of like how they would translate to other countries, but most I think would translate fairly easily.
Great. I think we can take this last question if you would permit us and wrap up. So he's saying, can a pharmaceutical technologist apply to?
So I don't know what a pharmaceutical technologist is. So I would say our school doesn't have pharmacy, right? But other schools have pharmacy. So I guess it would depend on, is a pharmaceutical technologist, is that a bachelor's degree in Nigeria? Does anybody know?
I suspect yes.
Okay.
I suspect yes, a bachelor's degree.
So I think, that's a complicated question. I don't know if I have a good answer for that. I think it would depend on what degree you're applying to, what program you're applying to. So I might just have to, I don't know if I have a good answer for that one. It's very specific, but maybe the background in pharmacology has got biology and chemistry in it. And maybe there's a master's program that would look at that transcript and say, okay, maybe we don't have exact pharmacy, but there's other things you can apply to and it would translate, or a pharmacy school might look and say, yep, you have some background that we find okay. But that's also one that's a little bit tricky in terms of like a qualification and being careful about how that translates from one country to another.
Great. On this note, we will like to say thank you very, very much for our viewers who have missed this program from beginning. I can see a lot more people are joining towards the end of the program. Okay, so the gentleman is also thanking you for clarifying. I thought of letting you know about his thanks. Yeah, so the video is live on or is recorded, and you can see it almost immediately after this live session on our social media handles at Talos G at X, and Talos G on Facebook, and Talos on LinkedIn. Thank you very, very much. The conversation will keep going. And if there are other questions that have not been answered, that you need any of the viewers here, listener wants answered, they can share with us at esteemed.usa@tlearn.co. We will do our best to help out, and if we need direct assistance from the school, we will share them with the school. Thank you very, very much once again, everyone. The people who have sent in their questions, the people who have listened. For ongoing engagement, follow our social media handles or follow our social platforms. Visit our website, talos.co.uk or tlen.co for more resources and details about upcoming events. Do not forget to also there's a place where you can register to indicate your interest in any of our programs. Do not forget to do that if that catches your attention. Thank you for joining the T Learn Life series. Stay curious, stay driven. Here's to your success in United States of America. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.